On this episode, we discuss The Call of the Wild.
Oh! Wipe out.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Flophouse. I'm Dan McCoy.
I'm Stuart Wellington.
I'm Elliot Kalin, and who's this special guest we've got with us this week?
It's the boss, not Bruce Springsteen, but Jesse Thorn.
That's how I like to enter any podcast, as a mild disappointment.
I set you up and I knock you down.
Here it is. The boss, straight from E Street in Asbury Park, New Jersey. It's Jesse Thorn.
Little Stevie Van Zandt.
Think about how bummed Bruce Springsteen would be if he agreed to do our podcast and then found out we were talking about movies and not just like blue-collar stuff.
Yeah, old trucks and things. The same thing that Stephen King would be upset about if he was a guest on the podcast. Here's the question.
He's a regular on... Do you guys not listen to Guitar Tone Cast? He's a regular on that one.
He
Not
is?
familiar.
That makes sense. He's in that, like, what is it, The Remainders? I don't know, the
Rock
best-selling
Bottom Remainders?
authors, yeah, band.
Did you know that I know the founder? I knew, she's passed away sadly, but I knew the founder of the Rock Bottom Remainders literary rock band.
I didn't know that. Should I
was my
update the
boss.
personal wiki I have for you on my computer?
I have had all of one job in radio, not counting the 3 weeks that I was an intern on a morning radio show before I realized I could not get up that early.
Uh-huh.
And you and the Mad Dog just never got along.
Yeah. You weren't wild enough for the zoo crew.
Yeah.
I was literally not allowed to make eye contact with the hosts of the show. That was one of the rules, really.
Oh, no.
But on this other wonderful show I worked on called West Coast Live, which was a public radio show out of San Francisco, my boss, Kathy Goldmark, was the founder of that band. Like, she had every publishing job ever before she became producer of this radio show. And so she was just buddies with Dave Barry, Amy Tan, Matt Groening, Maya Angelou, all these people. And they would just come by. They would just come by the radio show and to see their rock and roll friend, Kathy Goldmark.
It's really nice.
great.
Do you guys think that Bruce Springsteen ever watched Who's the Boss on TV and was like, when are they going to invite me on that show? I'm right here.
Yep, he keeps
Just
looking in
ask.
the mirror and he's like, am I the boss?
Yeah, there's the time he actually went to set and was standing outside the door just waiting for a cue that never came.
Yeah. Maybe I'm supposed to go there. Maybe I'm supposed to start the idea.
Dan, the scenario you described is just about sad enough to be the subject of a Bruce Springsteen song.
He did write one song about sitting in the movie theater with a single tear rolling down his cheek as he watched Boss Baby and thought about how he hadn't been invited to be in it.
Well, that his childhood, he never really got to feel as carefree as a baby, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so for the possible new listener who's listening right now saying, what the fuck is this show about?
Being like, I love Bullseye, interviews with relevant and sophisticated cultural arts figures. So I followed Jesse Thorn to here, but what is this with these morons? What are they, Dan, what do we do that they should know about?
Well, these real dinguses watch a bad movie and then talk about it. Or, a movie that has been either commercially or critically drubbed. And this week, as the announcement at the top said, we watched The Call of the Wild, based on the book The Call of the Wild by Jack London.
Hello, it's me, Jack London.
He was
the
a famous
most
American
Jack Englishman there is. Hello. Oi, the Ripper struck again. In me, Jack London.
Yep.
This whole thing was a setup for Elliot's signature character.
Jack London.
I'm so glad we have Jesse here because Jesse is, of course, the second native favorite son of Northern California after Jack London. Jack London, of course, being Northern California's favorite native son and Jesse being the second favorite. So what you knew Jack London, right?
Yeah, we were good friends back in the 1890s. In the prospect. How would you rank the native children of Northern California? You'd say Jack London number 1, Number 2, Jesse Thorn, of course, because I'm the host of the least popular NPR program, Bullseye. Then number 3, maybe Joe DiMaggio.
If you're asking me, the least favorite is Wait, Don't Tell Me, because I hate it so much. But yeah, no, I guess I don't hate it. Yeah, then Joe DiMaggio would be number 3.
Well, you can hate it. I hate it.
Joe DiMaggio would be
people.
So Joe DiMaggio would be number 3.
show.
Number 4 and 5 tied the Olsen twins because Full House was set in San Francisco.
Sure. Yeah, it did have that one San Francisco shot.
Yep.
Number 6 is The Idea of Uneven Terrain, very popular in San Francisco. And number 7 would be Johnny Pixar, founder of Pixar up in Emeryville, Northern California.
Yeah.
Now, I actually would like to spend just a second on the book Call of the Wild up at the Call of the Wild up at the top. I read that, of course, in middle school or early high school. I think it was an assignment rather than something I was reading for myself. What's your guys' experience with the book, if any?
I had the Classics Illustrated Call of the Wild, or The Call of the Wild, and I remember being a big fan, although I remembered very little of the plot points. So this movie was all new to me,
I just got some late breaking news that there's been a change in the favorite sons and daughters of Northern California.
Oh, cool, okay.
Mary Kate is number 4. Number 5 is Boots Riley, and number 6 is Daveed Diggs, and 7 is Ashley. So the Olsen twins have... Wow. I don't know how one was chosen over the other. Again, I'm not from Northern California. I'll have to ask my wife, who is a native of that area.
Now, do you think
bad
they can
news
survive
for you,
this?
the Lonely Island.
But as for Call of the Wild, it's one of those books that I think I must have read like an abridged version of it when I was very little, and I never read the full book, and I've always been curious about it since, for whatever reason, the Jack London book I know best is The Scarlet Plague, the book about a virus that kills all of San Francisco, and not any of his better-known books.
I bought a copy at a thrift store thinking I would bring it up to my cabin and maybe one of my kids would want to read it at some point. And I ended up picking it up at the cabin and reading it with my daughter. And I had never read it as a kid, and it totally rules. It is so cool and badass and fun and like thrilling. It is definitely too brutal for kids. And I don't know why it's a children's book.
Yeah, there's a dog fight in it, like a for reals dog fight.
I was talking to my wife about this. She's a children's librarian, and we were talking about how there's a lot of books that because they are old and maybe they have an animal in them, they become children's books when they were never intended to be juvenile literature. And the same way that, like, I think most people read, like, it doesn't have animals in it necessarily, but most people read, like, Hemingway or Fitzgerald in high school and then never again. So it's like, oh, yeah, that's kids' books. But, like, it's not. It never was.
Yeah.
Like, Jack London was not a kid's author.
The Call of the Wild was written for the pulps. And, yeah. The thing about the book, though, that I kind of wanted to bring up was just that a lot of the incidents in the book are actually in the movie. They are softened. Like, changes are made to make it much softer, and the tone overall is much softer than the book by far, because they are trying to make this a kid's film, basically. But it's weird.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the plot's still there.
Yeah, and they kept all the raps from the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When Kangaroo Jack showed up?
Yeah, when Kangaroo Jack London showed up and was like, I'm gonna write this movie, good day. Well, here's a story about a dog, and he lives down in a smelly bog. And they're like, that's not what it's about, Jack.
Jesse's right here. Famed rap aficionado, Jesse Thorn. And you are just butchering.
So
Yeah,
sorry,
and he's currently transcribing Elliot's lyrics into rapgenius.com.
Yeah. So, Jesse, what kind of rapping did Jack London do? I apologize.
There is so much intense brutality in the book. Both it is the story of a dog becoming wild, right? Like leaving the trappings of civilization behind and triumphing through pure ferality. And it is very strange. And there is like brutality of the dog and by the dog and to the dog, all of them. And it is very odd to think that someone sat down and said, like, okay, how can I help 7-year-olds watch this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we talk about? Let's talk about the specifics of the movie, then, guys. Should we dive in? All right.
Let's
so
do it.
It's a shocking movie. The first shock, the logo. It's 20th Century Studios. Huh? That's the 20th Century Fox fanfare, and yet it doesn't say Fox in the logo. This is the first movie I think I've seen come out from that studio since Disney bought it, and it was bizarre to me to see it not say Fox, it just said Studios. It was weird. Then,
branding-wise, Elliot, I would say the most interesting part of that to me was that when they sat down to decide what to do with the 20th Century Fox name, they decided we want to keep the 20th century part.
Yep, because it's
and
relevant.
drop the part that everyone knows.
Well, it's weird because it's literally
keep the part that's wrong, drop the part everyone knows.
It's literally like 100 years ago that 20th Century Studios and Fox Studios merged to become 20th Century Fox, and it is weird that they have now separated out again. It's, a divorce after a marriage of almost 100 years. Sad, really, when it happens, but the children will be kept away and never shown in repertory theaters again. Thanks, Disney. So we start with a voiceover from Old Man Harrison Ford. He tells us it's the Alaska Gold Rush of the 1890s. They need big, strong dogs to pull sleds. Luckily, we're about to meet a big, strong dog. His name's Buck. And how would you describe the CGI used to create this dog? I would call it off-putting.
Well, here's the thing. I don't know. I probably just got Stockholm Syndrome over the course of the movie. Like, as the movie wore on, it did not bother me at all that much. At the beginning, like, Audrey at one point asked me, she's like, this isn't all CGI, is it? I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, this is definitely all CGI.
Yeah, the part where Buck is smoking a cigar and driving a taxi cab.
Yeah.
Now,
I read about the director. So the director's background is in animation. He co-created and co-directed Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon.
Stitch was his idea. Lilo was the other guy's idea.
Yeah. And I read him describing this as like they had an actor in a mocap suit and they did scans of a real dog, and then they kind of animated him up a little bit because the dog is really the protagonist, right? Like in the book and in the story, it's about the dog. The owners are incidental, and only the fact that they happen to have gotten Harrison Ford to be one of them, makes it so that is 2/3 of the movie. But like, it's about the dog, and he said he made him more animated-y, a little more exaggerated or hyper real in order to address the fact that they would have to animate him, or else because they needed more acting than a regular dog could do.
I mean, it makes sense because dogs are notoriously hard to read emotionally. Dogs are. If there's ever an animal that is just a stone sphinx, a total mystery and enigma, it's dogs.
I mean, if you're making a movie, if there's one animal that there is an extreme shortage of trained versions of,
Okay. I mean, well, this dog does do a lot of acting, and also is put in danger that you would never want to do to a real dog.
No, that's true. That's true. And so I had a similar feeling to you, Dan, where when I first saw him, I was like, whoa, what is this cartoon dog doing here? But as the movie would go on, and again, maybe this was partly because I was doing the dishes while I was watching it, I kind of forgot he was a CGI dog until there were moments when he would be very CGI. And I would be like, oh yeah, that's not a real dog.
Right at the beginning, there are some like, ain't I a stinker moments for the dog?
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, is this dog going to tear a man's throat out later?
Yeah, at the beginning, the dog's a real Marmaduke.
He's a real Beethoven. Yeah, he's...
like, stop leaving chains of linked sausages lying around for this guy to grab and run around with.
He lives in Santa Clara, California with Judge Bradley Whitford. And he's a real Beethoven, a Marmaduke. He does whatever he wants. He licks big blocks of ice in the street. He ruins big picnic banquets until...
Everybody loves him, though.
Everybody loves him.
His name. They also know that you can't mess with him because he's the judge's dog. And if you mess with his dog, you're gonna get murdered, I guess. I don't know what
thrown in jail. The
judges do.
And Bradley Whitford...
he looks like a hanging judge.
Bradley Whitford is one of the a few times in this movie where I'm like, you got like a name actor for this role? Like, he exists just to sort of like look disappointed at the dog in the beginning and leave him outside the house.
This should have been... I mean, he also deserves bigger roles, but to me, I was like, this should have been a Brad Dourif role. They got the wrong Brad. They got Whitford when they should have gotten Dorif. Okay, so one night, though, Buck's idyllic life as the bad boy of Santa Clara is interrupted when he is kidnapped. He's taken and away by some bad men, and when he comes to, there's a mean man with a club who teaches him the law of club and fang, that in the world outside idyllic Judge Brad's house, it's only violence that is the master. And Buck is like, I'm afraid of this club. I don't like getting hit by it.
Yeah.
And he tries to escape, but he's on a boat to the Yukon. Jesse, you mentioned Lonely Island before. Mention him again, because Buck's on a boat.
Hey, they recorded a song called We're on a Boat.
Yep.
And they recorded a song called The Call of the Wild, right?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, did
not?
they?
Yeah, Dan, can you sing a couple bars?
It's the call of the wild, da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, etc.
Exactly.
I'm pretty handsome for a funny guy.
Yeah.
I have a slightly exaggerated mouth size.
Wow.
You're edging into anti-Semitism, Jesse. And now, okay, so they get to land. Buck slips his leash for a moment and has kind of a meet cute with a Gandalf bearded Harrison Ford when Harrison Ford drops his harmonica and Buck returns it to him. But they don't get to spend too much time together because Buck is soon sold to Perrault, a Quebecois mail carrier, and his wife, Francoise.
You can just say partner, I think is
okay,
fair.
partner, an Inuit woman that is also on this mail-carrying mission with him. Buck joins the sled team of CGI dogs who are led by the mean Spitz, a bully dog who rules by fear. What did you guys think about Spitz?
Spitz is probably German. I remember when I was when I read the illustrated version, I was always like, man, that Spitz guy, he seems pretty cool.
Yeah.
Things
Oh,
go
yes.
real well for that.
Spitz
that dude.
McKenzie.
But I do like one of the advantages of doing all cartoon dogs in this movie is that you can make this sled dog team all unique looking dogs. They don't all look the same. Having been to Skagway, which was very exciting to see Skagway depicted on the silver screen of my apartment. I've also met teams of sled dogs, and they all kind of look alike. I mean, they're all good boys, obviously. But I half expected like one of the dogs to be like an English bulldog.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how deep into the production they were still considering like, fuck, maybe we should just give them all. Let's just have all the dogs talk.
Yeah.
There was a discussion at some point. Should we have the dogs talk, and how radical and how much attitude should they have? Yeah.
It did look weird to have. I've already forgotten the main dog's name.
Buck.
Buck. It seemed to me like it was weird to see Buck at the head of this thing for the reason Stuart talked about. Like, it's not like there were just like a bunch of huskies, as you might think, or something like that. But
And they also didn't look that big and strong, despite what the opening of the movie suggested was needed in the Yukon.
Yeah, that was the surprises. I think they were going visually just to help you set the dogs apart, but they really didn't seem like it seemed like this was the ragtag kind of like Hoosiers of the or Mighty Ducks of the sled dog team. It was going to take a real charismatic guy to make them run fast, and we've met that guy, and his name is Buck. Unfortunately, at first, Buck is a terrible sled dog. He almost leads them off a mountain at one point, it seems. But he has visions of a primordial wolf spirit, which inspires him to work hard and be tough. Guys, your thoughts about the wolf spirit?
I didn't have thoughts about the wolf spirit, but I did want to say that, like, part of this whole thing, this process of him becoming a better sled dog, is the mail carrier's unwavering faith in Buck as like he's going to be the greatest dog of all time kind of feel, and also he's like constantly talking to the dog and encouraging the dog in a way that makes it seem like everyone in the movie expects the dog to understand human language. There's a scene where the guy like literally shows all of the dogs a map, and he's like, "We're gonna go here."
Dan, have you met dog owners?
That's true.
They do call
Jesse,
that out in the movie. There's a scene where the lady of that team says, like, that they don't speak English, right? And he keeps talking to them, but it is like it speaks to the fundamental challenge of making a movie out of this book, which is this is a book about like lonely people with no one to talk to. and with a protagonist that cannot speak. And so you really have to figure out how are we gonna make clear even what's happening without internal monologue.
What you just described, Jesse, sounds like the Jim Jarmusch version of Call of the Wild. Just like a series of lonely people and a mute dog narrator who just kind of roams between them.
The answer they choose is, by the way, is to have Harrison Ford break in intermittently for no particular reason before and after his character is introduced, while his character is on screen and not on screen with voiceover narration.
I think it's the rationalizations. It's a good way to justify Harrison Ford being on the poster. Because if you're kind of hearing him even in the scenes he's not in.
Now, when you decide to go live off in the wild by yourself, who would you want to narrate the story of your life leading up to that point? Do you think Harrison Ford? Do you think Harry Ford would be your first choice?
I want to quickly say that I think Harrison Ford does a really good job in this movie. Like, I think the rap on later period Harrison Ford.
Wow, you hoping to get him as a guest or something? What's going on over
I would
here?
love that. He's my nostalgic pick for my favorite actor, even though he's often very sort of lazy about it. But here he seems to be actually caring about the material, which I like.
I think the weariness that he shows in his other roles, which usually comes off as I can't believe I'm fucking doing this, really works for this character who has a world and soul weariness that he has to overcome and does overcome. But I would say probably Emo Phillips.
Yeah,
that'd be perfect.
Or an Emo Phillips type, like a French Stewart, maybe.
No, not at all. No, thank you. If we can't get emo, one, I'll be surprised, and two, I don't want a FOMO to come in and pretend to be emo. No, thank you.
I mean, who am I
emo
kidding?
works, Elliot. You gotta pay. You gotta do better than scale, I think, to get.
No. We'd make it worth his while. But okay. I want him to do it. But it's not like he's not going to be like, well, give me $10 million or I don't get out of bed. That's.
Yeah, but he gets good money for his weekend at Go Bananas in Cincinnati. Like he's
because he's amazing. Because he's an amazing performer. Yeah,
he's great. Emo
that
Phillips rules.
was when Elliot decided to go off the grid.
Mm-hmm.
That's I would love it.
To your point, Dan, like I went into this movie with the thought where I was kind of wondering whether Harrison Ford was even good at acting.
Wow.
Like I really like Harrison Ford as a movie star, but I was trying to think back to different Harrison Ford movies and thinking like, did he do anything or does he just have some quality to him? And I agree completely. I thought Harrison Ford was fantastic in this movie. He did more than he usually does and carried it off very well, and felt completely grounded talking to a CGI dog, which is very weird and awkward place to be as an actor. And I thought he did beautifully. And I thought his voice sounded beautiful in the narration.
Yeah. I also think he was really great. I think when dealing with Buck, he was drawing on his years working with a man in a bear suit in the Star Wars movies. Like he's used to having a furry companion who can't be understood. But I'm gonna have a spoiler and say my summary is partly colored by my having really enjoyed this movie. And when I saw the trailers for it, I was like, why did they make this movie? Who did they make an adaptation of Call of the Wild for? And then I realized, I was like, oh, dads. That's who this movie is for. Yep. This is like what I would call a kid's movie for dads, where I was like, oh, I would get so much more out of this than my son would, but I would make him watch this with me. Like that. Well, this is a kid's movie for dads.
Completely reshot and re-edited with input from, what's his name, the Ford v Ferrari guy.
Oh, James Mangold?
Yeah, he gets a producer credit on the movie, and I read that he led them through a second round of shooting to refocus the movie on Harrison Ford and make sure that it was a live action film and not an animated film, and so on and so forth.
Oh, that makes sense. That is James Mangold, right? Who did Ford v Ferrari?
Right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So this would be a lovely double feature with Ad Astra or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
the ultimate dad
movies.
Movie.
Like I said, he sees that wolf spirit, and he learns to be hard and tough. And he's also, and here's the difference, he's generous to the other dogs. He shares his food, he's nice to them. Spitz hates that. But the other dogs love it. And Buck is now...
I'm really glad they make an effort to make Buck sympathetic, because it's really tough when a dog character is introduced for the audience to side with them.
It's maybe the most instant reaction that any audience in the world has is the minute a dog enters the movie, everyone is like, that's my favorite character in the movie.
If anything bad happens to that dog, I'm going to kill a human being.
Stuart, I think you may be discounting the extent to which audiences hate a stinker.
That's
true.
That's true.
As shown by the fact that Bugs Bunny, a noticeable stinker, has not had like a real major effort until these new cartoons in HBO Max, whereas Mickey Mouse, perhaps the most unstinker there ever was, is a huge merchandising sensation.
In the book, Elliot, this black wolf in the movie is the titular Call of the Wild, right? Like, it is an ineffable pull on the dog's soul that it feels and is like confused by, frankly, like worried and confused by, as it is drawn further and further from the world of man, right? Yeah. And in the movie, what they decided to do was to put a wolf on a hill.
It looks like the cover of the Natton's Madrigal album by Whitford.
I mean, I have to say,
That's
I think
exactly
it's a good...
what I thought, Stuart. I said to myself, this looks exactly like the cover of the Natton's Madrigal album by Wolver.
I would say I would rather that than have them do like they did in Frozen 2, where it's literally just a voice that comes out of nowhere for no reason and starts beckoning Elsa into the woods.
Give me a spirit.
Yeah, I'd rather have woods. Rather than something going ooh in the woods and being like ruh-roh.
I would go one step further and make it a little bit more like Lynchian, and in the snow there would be like an end table with an old-timey telephone that would be ringing. That would be the Call of the Wild.
And then
Elliot
a guy
actually had a cut of this movie before James Mangold got invited, and it had the narration from Harrison Ford, but the Call of the Wild wasn't a wolf on a hill; it was Emo Phillips.
Oh, wow!
Again, totally works for me. Yeah. I love the idea now of a David Lynch version, Stuart, where the soundtrack is just like doom 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 as they're in a sled race. Okay, so Buck is now part of the pack, and he loves it. Buck is everyone's favorite. He even wins over Francoise when she falls into icy water and almost drowns, and he saves her. And that night, a jealous Spitz, knowing that he is no longer the MVP, most valuable pack member, attacks Buck, and he keeps knocking him down with these jump bites. Stuart, as a fighting expert, how would you rate Spitz's fighting style, which is entirely jump-based?
Well, I mean, he's all fucking rushdown, right? And you're like, dude, as soon as Buck figures out your fucking like 1-2s, he's gonna destroy you, because he doesn't even block. He's just all attack. And of course, that's what Buck does. He gets a reversal on him. Picks him up in the air, he catches him out of midair and lifts him up, and Spitz has a moment where he's like, oh, fuck. Now he's about to ground combo me, and of course he does.
Yeah, exactly what happens. Buck is hurt, but the wolf spirit comes over and is like, get the fuck up and fuck up that dog. And Buck does it, and he just makes Spitz submit, and Spitz wanders off in shame, never to be seen again.
That's what happens in the book, right?
There is, like...
that's what the Call of the Wild says.
I mean, in the book, he kills him.
Yeah.
Whereas here, there's some of that dog acting we were talking about, where they give each other a look, where he's like, "Huh, you gonna stay down?" And the other guy's like, "All right, okay, cool."
And Spitz is wandering off and looks back sadly, as if to say, "I was a king once," and then he just wanders into the void.
I had my own hole in the ice to drink water from.
And this harmonica picking up
the main way they express how that he's the boss is that he has a hole in the ice that he won't let anyone share.
Now, there's something in this movie that is something I mean, I like this movie again, and I like the story, but there's something I don't like in it, which is, I will call it the Tarzan Fallacy, which is Buck is kind of like a pampered rich man's dog. But when he goes into the wild, he is the superior of everybody. And he not immediately, but through hard work, but he is recognized as special, and he rises through the ranks over dogs that are more experienced and more wild than him. And it's the same way that Tarzan, who is an English baron who is lost as a baby, becomes king of the apes, even though... Why should he be king of the apes? There's like a hidden sort of... not racial in this case because they're dogs, but this hierarchy of like a civilized person is still better than a non-civilized person in a way that made me uncomfortable as the movie went on, when Buck is reinvigorating the wolf pack with his genes in a way that makes them the uber dogs. And I was like, later on, and I was like, I don't know if I like the message of this movie anymore.
Yeah, I guess that part is true. I was gonna make an argument that like the highest good that the movie presents is being wild, but then, like, yeah, he does make some sort of super race by mingling with the wolf,
which totally fits into the background of the kind of racial genetics of the late 19th, early 20th century. But anyway, the important thing is The next morning, Buck insists on being the lead dog in the sled now that Spitz isn't there and the other dogs back him up. And Buck starts pulling them so fast that Perot, the mail delivery guy, is like, yes, this is amazing, and his cheers cause an avalanche. Are they going to be killed? No, because the wolf spirit shows up and is like, hey, Buck, there's a shortcut through an ice cave right here, which was weird, because it's not like that's information Buck knew that was coming. Like, now it's just like there's a ghost of a wolf that's following him and telling him.
Genetic memory, Elliot.
And that's the thing, like, every
Genetic
time
memory of mail delivery routes, Dan?
Yep.
every time I'm playing Mario Kart, I wish a fucking ghost spirit would show up and show me where the shortcuts are so I stop looking like a fool. Of course, you're probably wondering, just to let everybody know, when I play Mario Kart, I always play Wario, no one else, only Wario.
What?
Yeah. Now,
Exactly.
who are you looking like a fool to in this scenario, Stuart? That's
Toad, Yoshi, the princess.
true,
That's the
yeah.
one that hurts the most.
okay. Sure.
The dry bones.
Now
Your
these
bullet
sled
bills.
dogs, they were advertised
Bullet bill
back
can't
then
drive
as the
a car.
original Mario Kart. For the first time ever, thanks to Buck's super fast leading, they actually deliver the mail on time. And people, this is what, Skagway? Is this where they are now?
I think
Yeah.
so. And
We
they
know-
deliver it in a shower of letters, right?
We
Yes,
know
and
this is consequential because earlier in the film, Francois, or whatever his name is, Jean-Luc Picard says, he goes like, I want to try, Perot says, I want to try and deliver the mail on time, but I never have.
Yeah, and then he takes a big bite out of a baguette.
Yeah.
And,
Which
Yeah,
is
he-
weird
he-
because again, he is Quebecois. And not-
Yeah.
yeah, not French. Well,
French.
they
Well, I
consider
mean-
themselves more French than Canadian.
He rolls out a giant scroll that has all of his life's goals written on it, and that's the only one that isn't crossed off. Every other one has been crossed off.
Yeah. Have sex in the rain. That was
Which is-
crossed off. Run a marathon.
Which is why
Kill
in
a
the
man.
scene, now that he has done it, he walks off into the forest.
He
never
walks
to be
off into
seen
the void.
again.
Well, the second closest thing. Anyway, people love the mail they get. Perot's like, we don't just carry mail, we carry lives. And this was, to be honest, the Valentine to the Postal Service that I needed right now. There is that hidden critique of the mail is never on time in this movie. And I don't know what he means by on schedule, since it's like, I don't know, it's the 1890s and you're in Alaska with a dog sled. How tough are they with the deadlines? I don't know. But Buck even shows he's got a little heart by delaying the next day's mail delivery until Harrison Ford can give them the letter he wrote to his wife about his grief over their dead son. More on that later. But when they get to the next place, the mail route has been terminated. Probably the president trying to fix the election, I've got to assume.
Yep.
They're just pulling mailboxes out of the Yukon. The dog team is sold to these snooty dilettante gold seekers played by Dan Stevens and Karen Gillan. That's right, everybody. It's the Legion Nebula team-up we were all waiting for.
Well, this is
And Dan Stevens is he's putting out some serious Waluigi energy here, and it feels a little bit like he's like, I need to tarnish my goody image by beating up dogs. And
He is
he
very
is-
much the bad guy. He is a real Waluigi, yeah.
Yeah, he's deliciously villainous. He has a villain's mustache to go with his attitude. But also, Karen Gillan is one of the other like larger names, and I'm like, what? Like, she shows up in like 2 scenes to be like, maybe we should listen to Harrison Ford, and that's it.
Yeah, she doesn't. I have to say, like Jesse was saying, I wouldn't be surprised me if there was a heavy edit done.
Yeah.
What I would call I call it a thin red line, where the editing process removes whole storylines and even actors and things like that.
Honestly,
that
I
happened
thought
on Thin Red
Karen
Line?
Gillan did a great job, but I would have liked to have seen comedian Natasha Leggero take this one on.
yes,
Like a lady in a Victorian dress relaxing on a dog sled sipping a Bellini or whatever is exactly what Natasha would have kicked butt at.
Yeah, that's it's fair. Although we wouldn't have gotten the MCU 20th Century X-Men Star Wars crossover that we get when Harrison Ford tells them, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to kill all those dogs. But they
Excuse
don't
me,
listen.
Elliot. This is a PBS crossover between Doctor Who and Downton Abbey. Thank you very much.
There's got to be, someone's got to have written a Downton Abbey Doctor Who crossover story, right?
Yeah, they'd be fucking.
yeah, once,
I don't think you know that much about the Doctor. He's kind of he doesn't really do a lot of that, but
yeah, but maybe he watches Elliot. I mean, I don't know what he's into.
He's got a lot
there
of
must be some.
companions.
How great would a crossover be where it's Tom Baker's Doctor and Maggie Smith from Downton Abbey? She's his new companion, and they're just traveling time and space. This like snooty, very sarcastic, rich old lady, and the craziest man who was ever on television in any way, shape, or form with a long scarf. What a great story! Someone write it, send it to me. I'm not going to write it. I don't have time. I've got 2 children. Okay, anyway. These rich jerks, they're treating the dogs terribly. Harrison Ford tracks them down, and he frees Buck, but Dan Stevens takes the rest of the dogs away at gunpoint, and you know they're all doomed. You just know it. There's no way they're going to survive.
Yeah, including all the other humans that are on the sled. They're doomed too.
Yeah, they're all doomed.
They never show back up.
And they leave knowing that they're doomed. Ford takes Buck back home, and he goes to a bar, and Dan Stevens attacks Ford at a bar saying, everybody fell through the ice and died. He blames Harrison Ford for it because he can't own up to his own mistakes. But who's there to save Harrison Ford? It's Buck. That's right. He knows where his bread is buttered. With the nice man, with the harmonica.
Now, guys, I'm looking at fanfiction.net right now, and there are 22 stories that are Doctor Who and Downton Abbey crossovers.
Great.
Including such titles as The Housekeeper's Tale, The Madman and the Rebel.
Wait, is that T-A-L-E or T-A-I-L?
That's a good question.
I didn't see it. We got Vera and the Dalek.
Just guess, Dan.
Ambassador
Guess
to the
which one it was.
Stars. Anyway, so, God bless you out there. Keep it up.
Okay, now look and see if there's any crossovers between Back to the Future and the Monster Serial Universe. You know, Count Chocula, Frankenberry.
Is this your way to keep me shut up, Elliot?
No, just I really like when you show the initiative to do research, and I want to gratify that and keep it going. I want to encourage it. Buck, he knows that Harrison Ford is drinking too much. He takes Harrison Ford's whiskey bottle and buries it in the snow and sits on it in what I'm calling a dog intervention. And Harrison Ford explains to him, oh, I had a son and he died of fever. He always dreamed of exploring the unmapped areas of the Yukon. Hey, Buck, you and me could go off and do that together. And they do. And they're canoeing through the rapids, and they get caught in rapids. And I was like, oh, no, something bad's going to happen. No, the boat just springs a leak, and Harrison Ford goes, I guess that's the end of that boat. And they just keep walking.
There is the part where Harrison Ford has to explain to Buck what a boat is. He's like, it's a boat. We're going to ride on it.
Harrison Ford lets Buck share his tent. They're having an idyllic time, and they have something between a father-son relationship, a man-dog relationship, and kind of like two people who have just fallen in love and just can't get enough of each other and just want to they just don't never want to be apart.
There was a part later on where Harrison Ford was talking to Buck about how, he and his wife just drifted apart after their son's death. And I did expect him to end it with, and now you're my wife.
Yeah.
He's like, but even before that, we had a sort of arrangement.
Yes. My grieving wife and I have an understanding. There's a moment where they're out in the wilderness, and it's beautiful there. And Ford tells Buck, your ancestors used to roam here, and mine. Back when we were wild. And I was like, your ancestors, Harrison Ford?
Yeah, in
sure
Santa Clarita, California, where they shot this movie. Where they obviously shot this movie.
If we go back to the cradle of civilization, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
There's a lot of scenes where characters like go outside and it's snowy, but they're like there's no breeze and it doesn't actually look that cold. It's that kind of a cold winter spot, right?
Yeah.
There are many scenes of transportation. There are many like long montages of them cruising the dog sleigh through the Alaskan wilderness that really look like they were painted by the painter of light, Thomas Kincaid. Like if you told him like take this still photograph we took of a hill in Santa Clarita and really northern lights it up. That's pretty much what none of the movie outside of Harrison Ford's face looks like something you could actually touch.
Yeah,
well,
that's fair.
I mean, even then, you're going to need a... Sorry, what did you say, Stuart?
I was just going to talk about how I assumed I was going to see the crowd from the pod racing scenes of Star Wars behind every corner, but, it's not that important.
No, I just wanted to warn our audience, even then you're going to want to get Harrison Ford's permission before you touch his face.
That's true. Consent is important.
But it does feel like there is a version of this movie. I'm sure they've made multiple versions of this movie over the years. I've never seen the 30s one, which apparently this one takes some elements from. But I guarantee you there's some version of this movie that was shot in the 60s where they really went to Alaska and they really had real dogs and everybody hated making it. But I kind of wanted a little bit of that in this. Like it doesn't have it loses a sense of reality that I would have liked to have seen. Or either that or I would have liked them to go all the way and just make this an animated movie. Like, there's no reason this couldn't be like a regular 2D Disney hand-drawn animated movie. And then you get some songs. Maybe the dogs talk a little bit. Like, you go as far as
Josh Gad gets a paycheck.
Yeah, Josh Gad is like the goofy dog from the Sleds. Like, hey, Buck, hey, we gotta, what's going on? Oh, that's Spitz. And Spitz is what, like, it can't be Jeremy Irons again. Spitz would be like Willem Dafoe,
cut to a
I guess.
stack of screenplays on Elliot's desk, all of which just over and over say, Josh Gad, hey,
Well, I mean, like, this is a thing that we talked about when we were watching it here. That, like, if they could take this basic, exact screenplay and exact tone, and if Disney had made it like sometime around like Beauty and the Beast or something, everyone would be like, "This is great." It really feels like it should be that.
I wonder if they pitched originally as an animated movie and they said, guys, Balto exists. The animated Alaskan sled dog movie is taken. We're
never going to erase Balto in people's minds and hearts.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, why don't we just buy up all the prints and DVDs of Balto and pretend it never existed? Like we did with...
Can't cost more than $5.
Like we did with Shazam, the Sinbad Genie movie that did exist, but we erased it from the permanent record forever.
Yeah.
But Jesse, you were going to say?
The thing that's a little bit of a bummer about the middle ground that they chose in how they present the film to me is there are a lot of things in the movie that work. We talked about Harrison Ford. He's wonderful. Like, I would just watch Harrison Ford and his elderly man, giant ears and nose, and big David Letterman beard. Like, I would love to watch that.
And totally ripped body.
I know.
There's that scene where he's swimming and he comes up and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, he's in great shape.
All that dude does is puff J's and do pull-ups.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a lot of great things about it, but, like, thematically, I think it is really poorly served by not having something you can sink your teeth into, and that was probably not the turn of phrase I should have used, because it sounds like I'm doing a pun here, but... Like
no, you're the modern day Gene Shalit. Just go run with it.
The fact that there's no grit in the movie, and there really is almost no grit in the movie other than Harrison Ford's face.
Yeah.
Is not just a bummer because I like to watch a gritty movie or whatever. Like the screenwriter of this also wrote Logan, which I'm going to alienate 60% of the listeners, but I thought stunk. And was very gritty, but but there's something about the theme that is served by grittiness, right? Like the story is him descending into animalistic brutality, right? And that these human beings are drawn into it by their greed, outside of Harrison Ford's character, and they like destroy each other, and that Buck has to learn to live freely within this new set of more brutal and terrifying, but ultimately more satisfying rules as an animal, right? Rather than as a false human, in the judge's household, right? And none of that means anything. Like none of him getting hurt and sick and being under threat and being beaten into submission by a club, like none of that means anything in the context of a movie for 7-year-olds. So either make it just like sweet and pretty, which you could do, or give it something. That was the bummer part to me about like the painted on Northern Lights in every scene. It's like I just want to see one thing go wrong. And I actually watched what's that called? Benji. I watched Benji not that long ago, like maybe like 9 months, and it is boring and homemade. Like this is original Benji. It is the most 1978 independent film you could ever watch. But I think that quality of having an actual dog on screen where it does the wrong thing a lot draws you in a way that having this perfect but slightly hazy because they're not quite good enough at the CGI dog on screen does.
I think that's true. And also I did get a sense from it that for a movie that is about a civilized dog being forced into primordial savagery to survive, everything comes a little easily to Buck. Like he never it's like, oh, he's working real hard, but he's not really pushing himself to work hard. Like everything is kind of dealt with when a problem comes up. It's kind of dealt with right away.
And he feels consistent in a way. Like it almost feels like he is ennobling his surroundings rather than being drawn into them and being transformed, which I think, like, in some ways the book is sort of like it is almost a satire of the idea of like of a character learning and growing, right? Because he is receding into his essential nature rather than expanding and becoming fancier and cleverer. And in the movie, it feels like he's kind of a very friendly, handsome, big guy who goes into all these different situations and is like, hey guys, let's do it my way. I'll make 2 holes in the ice for you to drink water from. And everybody's like, yeah, you are the best.
So let's just say it. In this movie, Buck is the Ferris Bueller of dogs. Everyone loves him. He never has to try very hard. He gets whatever he wants.
And this movie lifts like the trajectory and plot points directly from the recent the first Planet of the Apes movie from the recent batch. And Buck is very much like a Caesar type character, and he ends up like leading a bunch of wolves. And there's even a moment where he like catches a stick in his mouth instead of getting hit. And I remember being like, when I saw that Planet of the Apes movie, I was like, oh fuck yeah, beat him up, Caesar. But in this, it didn't have that emotional impact.
No, because he's already triumphed over everything all the time. So Buck and Ford, they find an old prospector's cabin. They decide to stay a little bit, especially when Harrison Ford finds some gold nuggets in the river while skinny dipping. This is when we see his hot dad bod, better than dad bod even. This is like, I mean, he is he a dad? I don't know. Anyway,
hey Elliot, how could you tell those were gold nuggets that he found? Was it
because they were like gold, yippee, yahee, hoo hoo?
They were like highly polished, like refined. Like it truly looked like he found something that had been like spray painted high gloss gold 7 times.
I mean, I'll let the movie get away with that. That's, in
case somebody wondered if it was brass that he found or whatever.
Yeah. A trumpet got shattered in the cold, and the pieces are just in the water.
It was like he's like, I found diamonds, and he like lifts an engagement ring out of the river. Was basically what it was like.
Yeah, wait a minute, that's
they're panning for
diamond.
gold, and again, they're panning for gold and getting nuggets, which is, if I'm going to go with Jesse, that's not how panning for gold works. You get dust when you pan for gold.
But I liked the idea that at the beginning of his pan for gold, he couldn't see the like 2.5-inch diameter nuggets that were in his 1 inch of water.
And Buck catches the eye of a sexy lady wolf, but she runs away when he tries to meet with her. But he wins over the wolf pack when, hey, guess what? He saves a wolf from drowning in the river. That's what Buck does. He saves people from drowning. Show us something different that Buck does. Now,
Neptune hates him.
The wolves all have these reaction shots like, okay.
It's pretty, it's almost, you're almost at the point of a wolf wearing sunglasses and like lowering the sunglasses to look over them at Buck. Now Bucky runs with the wolves. Harrison Ford is like, you know what? I've been cleansed of this experience and this adventure. I should go home. He says goodbye, but before he can leave, who's going to return? It's Dan Stevens. That's right, the guest. But he's no guest this time. He's an invader. No. He shoots Harrison Ford, and he threatens Buck.
How bummed were you guys that Dan Stevens didn't show up with fucking Spitz with him, right? Shouldn't they have shown up together?
That would have been the more Hollywood way to do it. Yeah, if it's all of Buck's enemies are now banded together.
And then Spitz has like a monologue, like a Richard III monologue, where he's like, cast out and ignored, now I shall have my day.
Well, you'd have the part where Dan Stevens is like, I meant to have my whole family die in the ice. It was all part of my plan. You fell right into my fingers. He threatens Buck with a club, that hated club, but Buck fights back. He's not afraid anymore after cringing for maybe like a millisecond. He shoves Dan Stevens into a burning cabin to die horribly.
And Viking funeral.
Yeah, and Harrison Ford dies in Buck's paws after a touching goodbye. And now, with his voiceover from Beyond the Grave, he explains that Buck has started a new pack. He's had babies with a sexy lady wolf. They even stare down a bear together. And the VO tells us...
It's a very like Last Unicorn Red Bull moment.
Yeah, because he just chugs that Red Bull down, and the bear is like, I don't want any part of this. That's
just like
this dude's wild.
And the VO tells us how after going from master to master, now Buck is his own master. as he followed some primordial urge from the wilderness, and then title, The Call of the Wild, as if the title was trying to prompt Harrison Ford about what phrase he was supposed to end the movie on. And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, that ending is an example of a phenomenon throughout the film, which is like every 15 minutes or so, there's just a brief scene where someone says out loud what's happening and what the themes are. And each one of those things, like some of them seem to have been part of the like added in voiceover parts. Some of them are scenes that are between Harrison Ford and Buck, where Harrison Ford explains the themes in Buck's life to Buck like a psychoanalyst. Mm-hmm. And they all have this goofy grandiloquence that is so unearned, so profoundly unearned.
It feels very much like a dad has sat me down and he's telling me a story, and I'm like, dude, I know what you're getting at. Just because you're saying it slowly doesn't mean it's important.
And where would you rank this in the Harrison Ford voiceover pantheon? Better or worse than the Blade Runner studio cut voiceover?
I like both versions of Blade Runner. Call me crazy. I enjoy them all.
I'm on record by preferring the version with the voiceover, so... I know that he's not doing much in that, but I still feel like that feels appropriate to the character. So
what, in Blade Runner?
Yeah, to not have.
in Blade Runner, it also does the necessary thing of explaining to you what's happening in this movie where the scenes make no sense and don't go together. But okay, so let's call it a draw then. Call of the Wild Harrison Ford, Blade Runner Harrison Ford equals
equal in esteem.
Let's do our final judgments, whether this was a good, bad movie, a bad movie, or a movie we kind of liked. Guys, if I was like 20 years old, say, I don't think I'd like this movie. But if I was 7, I would like this movie. And now at 40, I also like this movie. And I think, like 7, it might have been just like lower standards and being, like seeing a cute dog having adventures. And now a lot of it is, ironically, since one of the problems with this movie as a Call of the Wild adaptation is its lack of brutality, what I enjoy about it is it's kind of a throwback to a gentler, slower style of family film that maybe I'm just nostalgic for. I don't know. But I think that, Harrison Ford does a great job. I'm glad that they didn't really Hollywood up the plot points all that much, even though... they did somewhat. And, I thought it was fun. When Harrison Ford was about to get shot, I could see that this was going to be the scene where it happened, where Dan Stevens was going to show up. And I was, gripping Audrey's, leg. Audrey, who had lost interest long ago. But I was like, no, Dan Stevens is going to shoot Harrison Ford. And so the movie got me.
Yeah, I actually liked it a lot. I think I would have had the same trajectory as you, Dan, that as a kid I would have liked it. As a young man, I would have been like, ugh, this middle-brow, gentle adaptation of a book. I don't need it. But now it's a movie that goes down real smooth. Especially for a kid's movie, it's what you can say Call of the Wild may not really be the best material for a kid's movie, but also for a kid's movie, I don't need something that is super gritty and raw or anything like that. And certainly as someone who is also not a fan of Logan, I don't need the Logan version of this where Buck is cursing and ripping people's heads off and stuff like that. This is it. There was something about this movie just being a movie where I could be like, oh, I'm watching it and I'm finding this pleasant, and by the end of it, I feel good about Buck. Digging into some of the like I was saying, some of the cultural subtext of it. That's not a great idea. Don't do that because you're going to be unhappy with it, maybe. But as a viewing experience, when I finished watching it, I was like, oh, this is the rare Flophouse movie where I wish I had watched this with my son, because I think he probably would have enjoyed it. Some of the dog stuff might have been a little scary for him, but that's just him and dogs. Maybe that would any movie with a dog, he might have felt that way about. Although he did watch Oliver and Company recently, and that's a movie with dogs in it, and he liked that. But yeah.
What about All Dogs Go to Heaven?
I've actually never seen that. I've only ever seen little bits of it, and they're only the hell bits, and it's kept me from wanting to ever watch that movie, because I don't need to see dogs going to hell.
Also, Elliot, Sammy liked Oliver and Company mostly because it was an adaptation of Oliver Twist, which, of course, is his favorite novel.
Well, that was the second reason. The reason I liked it most is because he's such a big Billy Joel fan.
Oh, okay.
He's like, finally, my two favorite things, Disney movies and The Bard of Long Island. They're in one place, finally. But yeah, I actually liked this movie quite a bit. Okay, guys. Stuart, Jesse, tell me why I'm wrong.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm gonna say I actually think this is a bad movie. But I don't I ain't mad at it. It just like there's so little there. It feels very rewritten. It's not gonna stick in my brain. I don't know. And there's no grit at all. Like I don't need it to be like fucking Cormac McCarthy or anything. But but like I don't know. Like it would have felt nice. It would have been nice if it felt like any of these characters were anywhere other than a soundstage or in a nice part of California.
Yeah, that's true.
I have watched a lot of really terrible children's movies, and almost exclusively. Like I have 3 children, the oldest of whom just turned 9, and my media diet has really dwindled to like one comforting half-hour television program at the end of the day before I fall asleep, and movies I have to watch for work and for my NPR show, which tend to be, fancy indie movies, First Cow or something. And I have no complaints about that part of my life. That's great that I get to do that for work. And then kids movies that often, unlike Elliot, I haven't been able to trick my children into watching kids movies that I want to watch very often. So Elliot is just hanging out watching Marx Brothers movies and The Adventures of Robin Hood and stuff. And like
The Adventures of Robin Hood was a big hit. Hit with Sammy.
I tried to get my kids to watch Singing in the Rain and failed.
Another favorite in the family. The 2-year-old loves it.
It's a hoot.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get him to go for it. So I've seen a lot of just boring, lame ass kids movies, and this movie is definitely better than those. It's a 2-star movie. It's not a total failure. Harrison Ford is wonderful. I like watching dogs, but I do think it's a bad movie. Like even it is ultimately betwixt and between. Like they should have made a choice. Either we're going to make a beautiful children's movie that's very sweet, or we're going to make a movie with a little bit of zip to it. It doesn't have any zip to it other than Harrison Ford's face, as I mentioned. And it isn't very beautiful. Like it really does, as Stuart say, everything looks like somebody just used a stock animation for Northern Lights on top of a shot of a hill in Santa Ana. And
you know who I'm going to blame for that? This is going to be sorry to interrupt. This is going to be controversial. The cinematographer on this is Janusz Kaminski, and I am totally going to blame him because the last 12 years, 15 years of his movies have been kind of that same glossy, very, very post-CGI soft look. And like he does all of Steven Spielberg's, or most of Steven Spielberg's most recent movies, and they all have that same kind of like fakey studio look. Yeah.
And I'll say I watched a few of those Disney live-action reinterpretations of classic Disney cartoon movies. I saw Lady and the Tramp, and I saw Beauty and the Beast. And those,
if it's got an ampersand, you'll watch it.
Yeah, those like also
if it's two things with an and in the middle.
Those
well,
also
he runs
have
ampersandfan.com.
Fanpersand.
Those also have things to recommend them. Like Beauty and the Beast has those wonderful songs, and the Harry Potter lady is fantastic in that movie.
And Dan Stevens in that one too.
Yeah, but the aesthetics of them are such a garbage pile, and I will admit that they are worse. It's a worse version of the same thing. This kind of like everything looks like a Thomas Kincaid painting. But like everything has that weird softness to it in order to accommodate the fact that they can't quite make the dog look right. So it's hardly the worst, but it's a bad movie. Like if I watched it with my daughter because she wanted to watch it, I would have been grateful that it wasn't total garbage. But having watched it by myself, because my wife wanted to watch because my daughter wanted to watch a Harry Potter movie last night for Big Kid Movie Night instead. I was bummed that I had wasted that chunk of my life on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to the Flophouse, my friend. Welcome to the Flophouse. It's all about wasting chunks of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, a real split decision here. So I guess we're going to have to leave it up to our guest judge, Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford, what do you think? Is this a movie you kind of like, or a bad movie?
Bradley Whitford, because he was the judge in the movie.
Yeah, that's true, but he's not a judge in real life, unlike Harrison Ford, who is a judge now on the federal bench. So, Judge Ford, what do you think? All right. Well, thanks, Harrison. I guess it's non-committal, so I guess we'll just have to live with a split decision on this one.
It was a pretty good Harrison Ford growl, I gotta say.
Thank you. Thanks.
One thing
I wanted to mention. Actually, this is a bit that I forgot I was going to do. I didn't. I had forgotten that Call the Wild.
Sorry, should we put in our Forgotten Bits theme here?
Harris. No, this is me saying what you guys were all saved from. That Call the Wild is very similar to the plot of Dune in that it's about an outsider who comes into a more savage wilderness and becomes the leader becomes part of a tribe and then the leader of that tribe. And so I was originally going to start doing the plot as Tom Brokaw for those Flophouse fans who love Tom Brokaw describing Dune, but I forgot to. So.
Okay, well, don't do it now.
Throw that into Werner Herzog's Cave of Forgotten Bits.
I mean, it seems like it would take a lot of setup for that.
But what kind of Flophouse bit doesn't involve a lot of setup?
True.
Schmanners. Noun. Definition. Rules of etiquette designed not to judge others, but rather to guide ourselves through everyday social situations.
Hello, Internet. I'm your husband host, Travis McElroy.
And I'm your wife host, Teresa McElroy.
Every week on Schmanners, we take a look at a topic that has to do with society or manners. We talk about the history of it. We take a look at how it applies to everyday life. And we take some of your questions. And sometimes we do a biography about a really cool person that had an impact on how we view etiquette. So join us every Friday and listen to Schmanners on MaximumFun.org or wherever podcasts are found.
Manners, schmanners. Get it?
If you're looking for a new comedy podcast, why not try the Beef and Dairy Network? It won Best Comedy at the British Podcast Awards in 2017 and 2018. Also,
There were no horses in this country until the mid to late 60s.
Specialist bovine arse vet.
Both of his eyes are squid's eyes.
Yogurt buffet. She was married to a bacon farmer who saved her life.
Farm-raised snow leopard.
Download it today. That's the Beef and Dairy Network podcast from MaximumFun.org. Also, maybe start at episode 1 or, weirdly, episode 36, which for some reason requires no knowledge of the rest of the show.
So we've got a couple of sponsors. I would offer for Jesse to not be here for this, but there's just only 2, so I'm forcing them to sit around. Elliot, do you want to take the sponsor for once?
Sure, I'll take the sponsor. Today's Flophouse is brought to you by, you guessed it, Squarespace. Look, Squarespace is the place for you to go to create your own website. I've been meaning to do it for a while, to create my own website. In the future, we're all going to live on the internet. We're all going to need our own websites. You should go out there, start making your own website, and Squarespace makes it so easy. Your website will be beautiful. Let's say you got a cool idea. I have cool ideas all the time. They just disappear into the ether because I don't get around to make them into websites. I should use Squarespace.
Technically, Elliot, we have seen that pile of screenplays on your desk.
Yeah, most of my I need to make JoshGad.com your place for screenplays that involve Josh Gad being like, hey, guy, over here. So I'm going to take that cool idea. I'm going to use Squarespace to make it into a website. I can blog on there. I can publish my content. I can sell all my products, my Josh Gad, hey, guy, hey, T-shirts and services if you need me to put that into your screenplay. Does even more. And here's how Squarespace makes the difference. Because they've got their templates. You can customize them. They look great. So your website looks professional. You don't even need to code to do it. World-class designers designed this website and these templates.
This is something that on Jordan Jesse Go, Elliot, we really like to emphasize. There's a lot of provincial designers out there designing templates. And if you want world-class designers, I'm not even talking about State Fair, blue ribbon type designers, but international...
Olympics level.
These designers, these designs. They work in Senegal. They work in Milan, Italy. That's in Italy. It's the fashion capital of the world.
Name another place where it works. Give me another place.
Sorry, I'm all out. But the point of the story is,
look, when Carmen Sandiego goes somewhere, she knows that her website is going to work there because it was designed by a world-class designer.
She could go to
is this designer?
Milan or wait,
Senegal.
She could go to Senegal.
It also works in Senegal.
Wait, okay, no, just go.
I want to say
No,
Cleveland.
just Milan, Senegal.
No, that's wrong.
Let's say you want your website to work on a mobile device and also on a computer. It does it right there for you. You don't have to worry about that right out of the box. It does it. And you can use it to buy domains. You can choose from over 200 extensions, free and secure hosting. It sounds amazing. I had a website that I want to talk to you guys about. It's called www.primordialspirit.com. Sometimes we have trouble getting in touch with our primordial spirits. Buck was lucky enough that he just wandered by where his lives, the Yukon, but I've yet to find mine. And I want to find it. My primordial spirit, I don't even know what it looks like. It probably looks and sounds like Emo Phillips, to be honest. But I want to make sure. Primordialspirit.com matches you with primordial spirits, shows you where they live. Maybe they're in your area. Maybe they're not. In fact, we have one where it's just in your area. That's called Primordial Spirit Friend Finder. And that gets that's just for adults.
Elliot, will this primordial spirit help me find all the shortcuts in Mario Kart so I stop looking like a real jerk?
I can't promise anything, but yes, I promise you that is the case.
Hey, Stuart, take off your headphones for a second. Elliot, Dan, I was watching Stuart play Mario Kart the other day, and this guy looked like a real jerk.
Tell me about
it.
This
guy looked like a real jerk
like you wouldn't believe.
Oh, Stuart's putting his headphones back on. Okay.
Hey guys,
anyway,
okay, what's up?
Nothing. I was just talking about how with Squarespace, you can finally make the website you deserve. Just go to squarespace.com/flop for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code FLOP to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/flop.
Now, before we move on, Jesse, I just want to say I appreciate that during the thinking of places bit, your restraint. I know that you're famously unwilling to talk about San Francisco, so I appreciate that you held that line firm today.
I want to mention also, so yes, we're recording this the day after we did our live online The Boy Next Door screenplay reading with our good friends of the podcast, Hallie Hagland, Jenny Jaffe, Natalie Walker, and Jordan Morris, filling at the last minute and really helping us out. And that will be up on our YouTube page in case you missed it at some point in the future.
I think it just went up today,
now.
right?
Oh, it's there now. Well, then some point in the past when you're listening to this.
Also, I think this comes out like 2 weeks from now. So,
what, is the YouTube link going to expire?
No,
Did we not do it
just
yesterday?
Is YouTube going to shut down?
Yeah.
All right.
All your favorite creators are going to be out of work, Dan.
Yeah. If we sound tired, it's because with the intro, outro, and just the fact that a reading takes longer than a movie. I think it was a 2 hour and 40-minute marathon getting through that script, but I had a blast. I really had fun doing it, and people seem to enjoy it.
I had a really great time, but right now, Dan, I don't think anybody has to explain why they sound tired.
That's true.
I feel like everyone sounds tired right now.
That's the condition right now.
I would add to that, Stuart, I don't think Dan needs to explain why he sounds tired.
Yeah. Between my tendencies towards depression and sleep apnea, speaking of everything going on in the world, I woke up this morning thinking like, hey, why the hell do my neck and shoulders feel so fucking bad right now?
Did you figure it out?
Because I've been carrying stress in them for the past 5 months.
Yeah.
So
Probably.
that's the only part where we'll reference the outside world.
No, we're going to reference it one more time because late September, my new book, Sharko and Hippo, comes out. That's right. It's a kid's book by me with an all-new set of characters, Sharko and Hippo. Anyway, the art is by Andrea Tsurumi, who did a great book called Accident that I love, and Sharko and Hippo is coming out in late September to bookstores near you. Order them through a bookstore and then have it delivered to your door because, of what's happening in the outside world.
This Sharko and this Hippo, are they sort of an Island of Dr. Moreau, Marx Brothers duo? Or
without the Island of Dr. Moreau part, yes.
Okay, great. Hey, let's read some letters from you, the listeners. This one is from John from Milwaukee.
What's that call out there? Do I hear something coming through the snowy wastes? Why, it's Perot, the dog sled mailman, bringing the letters back to the flop house. Sometimes our letters come from far away in the frozen north, the Yukon, where letters sometimes go and sometimes come from. That's how mail works. Letters come from and go to the same places sometimes, all the way from Senegal to Milan. But in this case, it's the Yukon, where these letters are coming from. And here comes that dog sled of letters down the track to the flop house.
It feels weird to be annoyed by those letter songs right now with the way what's going on with the Postal Service.
Yeah, they need all the encouragement they can get with your...
I'm trying to do my part. Yeah, come on.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot.
So this first letter from John says, my wife and I recently
So John,
watched...
that's the full name, no last name withheld, just that's the full name, John?
Well, earlier I said John from Milwaukee, kind of forgetting the bit for a second. But yeah, John,
no
last
problem.
name withheld.
Yeah, it's John from
Writes-
Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
It writes and says, does anyone know what was going on in my show? Because I sure don't.
David Milch hasn't responded to any of my texts. He must be bedridden again.
He must be busy dealing with all of his debts. Anyway, continue.
John says, my wife and I recently watched Green Room and enjoyed it, but even greater was, near the end of the movie, the presence of the Dragonlance book, Dragons of Spring Dawning, was on the console of the van. I read the hell out of that series in middle school and bought it for my 6th grader for Christmas. What aspect of your real life appearing in a film were you excited to see? I remember it's not a film, but there were a couple of episodes of Mad Men where Don Draper's tumblers, I guess they're more like rocks glasses, were this sort of, obviously because of the time period, they were mid-century modern, but also because mid-century modern was big because of Mad Men at that time period. I also had these tumblers, these sort of throwback tumblers with squares etched into the sides of the glass. So that's the one I remember. What about you guys?
That's not that far from being like, I was really excited to watch Gremlins 2 because I had a full set of the Gremlins 2 trading cards I'd bought because of how much I love Gremlins 2.
It's true.
I think you got it, Stu. I think you got it.
It was, we had them before we started watching Mad Men. Let's just...
Who hasn't dreamed...
I liked them back when they were cool.
Who hasn't dreamed of capturing the depths of sadness reflected in Don Draper's compulsive drinking?
Well, I don't know. Like I mentioned earlier that I got excited when in the movie The Call of the Wild, they go to Skagway because, 2 years ago, Dan and I and some assorted friends went to Skagway. Mm-hmm. That was really fun. Other than that, I don't know. Like I was really excited when I saw the 40-year-old version of the theater and I saw some of the miniatures that Steve Carell's character was painting. And I'm like, oh, wow, I have some of those.
I think I'm going to have to say, anytime I see certain parts of New York specifically that I am well acquainted with in movies, I'm like, hey, I know that place. A movie that I love, The Landlord, was shot around my old neighborhood in Park Slope, Brooklyn. And there is a big Coca-Cola sign on a pizza place that was still standing for most of the time that I lived there. And I was like, oh, wow, that sign's been up there for like 50 years. This is amazing.
It was like when you saw Squid and the Whale and you're like, oh, I jizzed in that book.
Look, that diorama also reminded me of my parents' divorce when I would go visit it as a young man. But the time, weirdly, that I felt that way the most was there's a very bad movie called Robot in the Family, starring Joe Pantoliano and John Rhys-Davies, about it's like a robot that can find gold. It doesn't make any sense. But a lot of the movie, for whatever reason, was shot around this stretch of antique stores on Broadway between 14th Street and like 10th Street in Manhattan, and that was literally the street I walked, those blocks I walked almost every day as an NYU student from my dorm to the classrooms. So when I watched this movie, I was like, I know that whole block. This is amazing. And I was like, I could have walked through this movie, possibly. So
I could be in Robot in the Family.
It was very exciting, even though the movie itself is terrible. Don't see it.
The literal version of this for me 100% is the movie Sister Act, which was shot like 6 or 8 blocks from my childhood home, and
also Whoopi Goldberg taught you how to sing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, she told me actually that R&B hits of the 1960s were gospel songs, which was an unusual tack to teaching singing, but And I mean, it's like when that professor, I had a music professor named Harold Hill, and he taught me that all I had to do to play the trombone was think that I knew how to play the trombone, which also similarly unusual technique. But yeah, that like seeing the church by my house with fake graffiti on it to make it look more scary, and the Irish bakery by my house, and so on and so forth. That was like absolutely thrilling when that movie came out when I was 10 or 9 or however old I was when that movie came out. And but the more metaphorical version is my stepmother, when I was in my late teens, said she had heard about this new Bill Murray movie that she thought I would really like. And this was like right after like Operation Dumbo Drop or whatever. Was that the one that had Bill Murray in it? There was two, or was Larger Than Life?
Larger Than Life.
Larger Than Life, yeah.
This was right after Larger
Operation
Than Life.
Dumbo Drop was like what, Danny Glover?
Yeah, maybe
Danny
so.
Glover. I think maybe Dennis Leary was in it.
Yeah, I think Dennis Leary was in it.
As a 17-year-old, I did not yet understand. Like Bill Murray was 2 years out of my demographic in terms of how good he was before his career revival, and it turned out to be Rushmore that my stepmother was telling me I should go see. And like, besides just being insufferable, another thing I related to Max Fisher about was that like I was also a poor kid who went to a really fancy private school and fit very awkwardly. And also I was the president of a lot of different clubs.
This makes a lot of sense, by the way.
Yeah. And I actually had auditioned for Rushmore. I went to Arts High School and they came and auditioned in their like search, but I didn't even get to say a line. I was too tall. I walked in, they said, sorry, you're too tall. And I walked out. But I think it was the first time that I had seen a movie and like really directly related to themes in the character. And it was shocking to me. Like there were aspirational characters, you know, like, I don't know, maybe I thought I would like to be more like, I don't know, I was going to say Pee Wee Herman, but that's probably a bad thing to want to be like. Pee Wee Herman is an asshole. The man is not an asshole. I've met him. He's a really nice man. The character is an asshole.
Yeah.
But in terms of like seeing things from my life on film, in an emotional sense, directly, that was the first time. And it's odd to admit that it was Rushmore, which is obviously a very stylized movie where the protagonist is not always sympathetic, but
never sympathetic, some might say. Me, in fact.
Well, it depends on whether you had almost all of those experiences. Whether your actual
Rushmore,
dad
Jesse.
was a Vietnam veteran who was scarred by his experience there. Yeah.
This next question is from Lena, last name withheld, which is pleasingly alliterative.
It is. I just want to mention something I never knew about Operation Dumbo Drop. Looking it up now, is that it was set during the Vietnam War. Which
what?
Yeah, it's a kids' movie that's set during the Vietnam War with soldiers transporting an elephant through South Vietnam. So
I'm assuming listening to like Leonard Skinner songs and.
Yeah, that's when
probably
That's when I first found out that my dad was a vet. I asked him if he had gone through anything like that in the 60s. He said, "Let me tell you about my time on the carrier and that giraffe."
Yeah, he showed you pictures of his friend who's an elephant.
Yeah. Lena writes, "Dear Peaches, I'm writing to you in spite of Dan's advising anyone who intended to write you a letter to, and I quote, go to hell in the last episode, because I am in desperate need of your sage wisdom. My younger brother, 18, has recently become obsessed with slasher films. He talks about them constantly, analyzes their themes, gives his opinion on the merits of various sequels, and recommends movies he thinks you'll like. He even wrote a research paper about the gender politics of the genre. The problem is, he hasn't seen any of the movies he proclaims to love. Not one. He watches a lot of, like, horror review channels on YouTube, I guess, which is where I think he picked up this interest, but he never seemingly took the initiative to watch any of the movies he was hearing these guys talk about, and has just absorbed their taste in these movies into his own personality through osmosis. I can't begin to tell you how aggravating it is to be told how interesting the way the third Halloween movie subverts the formula of the franchise up to that point is by someone who hasn't seen a single fucking Halloween movie and has no idea what the fuck he's talking about and obviously is just parroting someone else's opinion down to the word. My question to you is, how do I get him to cut it out? Calling him out on his ignorance doesn't seem to work, and neither does cutting mockery. Believe me, my parents and I have tried both, but the man is without shame. He's not embarrassed in the slightest by the very silly thing he's doing. It's terrible. Can anything be done? What would you do if it was your little brother? Please advise. He's driving me nuts. Yours and Flop, Lena last name withheld. We're kind of cutting into the McElroy's business here. With this is more of an advice letter, but
you're right. We're not allowed to do that. Forget it. Let's not. Sorry, Lena, can't do it.
It's a zero-sum game,
I like
gang.
this turn.
Flophouse up, McElroy's down.
Everyone's got their thing. You can't do anything else.
If they ever talk about movies, they have to stop immediately, I think.
It seems like the best strategy, this might not be the most practical strategy, but it might be the most effective strategy, is wait until he's not a 17-year-old.
Yeah, that was going to be my advice. Just let him be dumb for a while, and then hopefully he won't be dumb in the future. Because also I think that if you argue with people too much, because humans are stupid and our brains are broken, often people tend to dig in even more at that point.
That's pretty cool. I was going to say, just keep sending him little like GIFs of those horror movies. So over time, he'll have to watch all of it, even if he's watching them in short clips.
Yeah. That's what you're doing with Critters gifts to us, even though we've seen Critters.
Yeah. Critters 2, various Japanese animation, etc. Oh, and Full House. I think the entire series of Full House.
I think, probably the only real thing to do is to just wait it out. I'm curious why he hasn't watched any of the movies.
Yeah,
I don't think that's the pleasure he probably gets out of it. This is not to, not become a therapist or a psychologist all of a sudden.
Because, again, that's the McElroy's thing.
I'm guessing it's more that he gets pleasure out of sounding smart about a topic or, like, figuring something out.
Yeah, it's
even
almost
if
like
he doesn't like the topic he's figured out.
It's almost like you want to introduce something to him that he can be smart about, that he also actually likes engaging with the main primary thing at the same time. But I definitely, when I was younger, I definitely would be very opinionated about things that I had only heard about and not seen, because that's part of being a young man, is assuming that you need to have an opinion on everything, knowing that your opinion is based on nothing, and then pushing that opinion harder to try to make up for the fact that deep down you know that you're a fraud. That's basically what being a young man is all about. And
an older man.
And an older man. A man of all kinds. A man of all seasons is one who knows that he is a fraud and cannot be the thing that he thinks he's supposed to be.
Yeah,
and
a fraud that walks
to...
on four legs at birth, 2 legs. Yeah, you know it. 3 legs eventually. That's how it goes, right?
Yeah.
3 legs
gets
eventually.
What walks on 4 legs at birth and 3 legs eventually? It's me, the Sphinx.
When the Sphinx is telling its riddle while trying to answer an email at the same time.
By the way, Elliot, what would you say is the most Sphinx-like animal? As you claimed earlier on in the show, dogs or perhaps sphinxes?
That's a good question.
Yeah, sphinxes are closer to sphinxes than dogs. Yeah. In terms of living animals, you got to go with a cat, right? Yeah. Because a cat always has a look on its face like you have just failed to answer a question properly that it has asked you.
Yeah, also sphinxes have the head of a cat. So it's those two things.
Well, they have the body of a cat.
Oh, body of a cat, face of a person.
The head of a cat on the body of a person is a fetish.
Yeah.
Which
I feel like if you were to tell a sphinx that it had a face like a cat, that would be a severe insult in sphinx culture.
Yeah. Now then, there's also, you got your like Assyrian type characters who are, there's sphinxes where it's like a lion's body with wings or an ox's body, and then the head of a man with a long beard. And those always seem
those are really cool.
I'm going to run into them in the real world, and I'll think they're going to say something really smart. Instead, they just go like, because that's my experience with bison. I always
Yeah,
think
it's like a
Bison are about
Lamassu
to
or
tell me
something.
something really wise.
Elliot, I'm going to let you keep going in just a second. I just wanted to let Stu and Dan know what happened is I had to go to the bathroom, so I just brought up mythological stuff so Elliot could do his thing for a while and cover for us.
Now, the interesting thing is the Minotaur.
No,
I think
but
traditionally,
now I don't want to hear.
So I think another thing that Lena can do with her brother is to start introducing things, is to start talking to him about it, really engage him on this topic of horror movies, but slip in every now and then something that doesn't exist that you're making up, and see like what, and not as like making fun of, but like to see how he reacts to it and what his opinion is suddenly on this thing that doesn't exist. And I want you to keep seeding it that way until eventually you're having a conversation where both of you are talking about things that don't exist all the time, and you know it, but he doesn't know it.
And I want you to write down his opinions on all of these fake movies and, send them to us in the future.
Yeah. So we can laugh and laugh at the thing we once were.
Pardon me, I burped off mic. Let's go to...
I like that you undid it by telling us about it, though.
He's bragging that he's drinking bubbly drinks again, huh?
That's why they call him Seltzer McCoy.
I'm rich in gas. Let's
go
look
at Jupiter over here, huh?
Yeah, look at Bespin over here.
Yeah, come on.
Let's go to the final segment in the show, which is to recommend movies.
I guess I'll just break up the shale in Dan and get some of that sweet gas out of there.
Recommend movies we saw often recently, but not necessarily that we liked. I will recommend. I finally got around to the Netflix Will Ferrell movie Eurovision Song Contest, the story of Fire Saga, which I had been kind of interested in just because I like goofy comedies, and Eurovision is certainly funny on its own.
And it's got Dan Stevens in it.
Yeah, well, the connection, the Call of the Wild connection is Dan Stevens, and I'll get back to him. But, I had been kind of Will Ferrelled out, at least in terms of the man-child comedies he usually does. But I found this to be a better application of that, a sweeter application of that. There's a kindness in the worldview of the movie that I kind of wasn't expecting. Now, don't get me wrong, Will Ferrell was not the best thing about the movie. The best thing by far, I think, was Rachel McAdams as the equally goofy, but somehow simultaneously grounded character of the two leads. I think she's terrifically funny, almost all of the time, and she just somehow finds the way to act a totally weird character. And Dan Stevens is in it, as Stuart says, as the person who would normally be the villain of this type of movie, but I think what they ultimately do with his character is sort of touching and heartbreaking and sweet as well. And I really enjoyed it, and it's got singing in it, which I always like.
Does Dan Stevens get pushed into a burning cabin in Eurovision Song Contest also?
I don't want to spoil it, Elliot.
I mean, there is fire in the title, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to recommend a movie that just went up on Shudder recently called Host. It is the first of probably, I don't even know if it's the first, but I'm sure it's one of a slew of horror movies that's made on a micro budget during quarantine, in a post-COVID time. And it is about a group of 20-somethings who are set up a Zoom call to hang out with each other, and the theme for their Zoom call is they decide to have a seance, and it goes just about as well as you would imagine. It's nice and short. It's under an hour. They do some fun stuff with the limitations of a Zoom call. But the thing I think that makes it work is that the stuff that happens before things get scary is engaging, and the stuff that happens after things get scary is also engaging. So I think the whole thing manages to work. So if you're looking for a short slice of horror that is also topical, I guess, check out Host.
Before we move to the next recommendation, just very quickly, there's a not 0% chance that I said the story of Ice and Fire Saga when giving the name. If I did, I was obviously thinking of Song of Ice and Fire, but there is just fire. There's no ice in Eurovision. Anyway.
No Yngwie Malmsteen.
Elliot, you look like you're about to go, so why don't you go?
Sure. This movie, The Call of the Wild, I said, I'll recommend a movie with wild in the title, so I'm going to recommend Ah Wilderness. This is the 1930s version of the Eugene O'Neill play Ah Wilderness, starring Wallace Beery and Lionel Barrymore, and one of my favorite actresses of the time, Aileen McMahon. And the script was adapted by Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich, who wrote The Thin Man, one of my favorite movies, and it's kind of another kind of goes down easy movie in a lot of ways. It's a little slice-of-life story about a young man who has just graduated from high school in 1906. He's about to go to Yale, and he has to be kind of saved from himself and his thinking of himself as a sophisticated man of the world who understands more than regular people, as he makes a couple of bad decisions and is pulled out of the kind of thing that nowadays would not have been a problem, but back in 1906 would have ruined his life beyond measure, namely going on a date with a woman that he shouldn't go on a date with and saying some things that might upset people.
I want to give a little factoid that is of no interest to anyone but me. I played said young man in the community theater production of Ah Wilderness when I was 17.
This is thank you. I'm glad you could bring that personal perspective to it. Mm-hmm. It's very much a kind of picture of that mythical small town turn of the century America that didn't really exist, but which is I don't know, something that a lot of jerks yearn for a return to. But it's kind of like if our town didn't have any of the metaphysical talk of the cosmos in it. But I really enjoyed it. It's just a charming little movie. Ah Wilderness. Jesse, what have you got?
Well, I'm going to first recommend a book. Elliot Kalin, I went over to his house the other day. We're quarantine buddies. And I was in a real mess. My life has been a really horrible mess lately. And I asked him if he could loan me a book that would not make me sad at all and would be interesting the whole time. And he loaned me a book called The Devil's Candy, which is about the making of the film of The Bonfire of the Vanities, Brian De Palma's film. And it is as absolutely engrossing and fascinating as a behind-the-scenes book could be. The movie was ultimately a huge debacle, both critically and financially, but involved all of these brilliant, amazing people. Tom Hanks and Bruce Willis and Steven Spielberg is in there, and it is a book about, I think, the same thing that The Flophouse is often about, which is that making a movie is so complicated and has so many moving parts that even if you bring together a bunch of brilliant people, it is so easy to just get it wrong. And it's a very sympathetic book to everyone who is involved in the story, even the executives who are mostly just kind of doing executive meddling. But I think the easy read of it is that it's the story of how executive meddling can ruin a film. But I think it really is the story of how a film can just go wrong. And it's very sweet in a surprising way and funny. And it shows you the fascinating stories behind every, one of the most interesting subplots of the book is the assistant director, who is a protege of De Palma's, trying to make his name by getting a perfect shot of a Concorde landing with the skyline in the background and the sun in exactly the right place. And he has to do months of calculations by hand to figure out when the sun will be in the right place and so on and so forth. And he nails it. It's the perfect shot. He wins a $100 bet with Brian De Palma. And it's mentioned in an article in American Cinematographer magazine, and all the credit goes to the cinematographer of the movie who was not present. And it's full of those fascinating stories of every kind of person, like people who worked on studio movies in the 50s and people who are totally go-go 90s and they're trying to make the ultimate 80s movie. It's a great book. So thank you, Elliot, for that recommendation to me. And I pass it on to America via the Flophouse. I will also recommend a movie. It is probably my favorite movie, and I'm always glad to recommend it, especially to comedy fans and practitioners, of whom I know there are many who listen to the Flophouse. It's called 1,000 Clowns. It was made in the early to mid 1960s, as the 1960s were just starting to trend towards the countercultural 1960s, where that idea was just being invented before Flower Children and so forth. It's based on a play that won, I believe it won a Pulitzer, it won some Tonys as well. And it's a story about a comedy writer who is probably 40-ish, who is unemployed, and he has quit writing on a children's show because it was beneath him. But with him lives his young teenage nephew, a 13-year-old kid who, for reasons that are explained in the film, goes by many different names. It turns out his uncle just lets him pick a new name whenever he feels like it. But this kid is being investigated. This kid and his uncle are being investigated by Child Protective Services, basically because the uncle is unemployed and the kid is often out of school. And the kid is sort of brilliant and precocious, but never shows up for anything. And they're worried that it is an unsafe environment for the kid. And the uncle is so resolutely anti-establishment and irreverent and amazing and charming, as only, Jason Robards could be. Like, it is a spectacular, hilarious, amazing performance. But you realize that the central conflict of this film is not this man against the establishment, but this man against himself, that he has to take responsibility for his own life, that just because he is anti-establishment and a hilarious, charming man doesn't mean that he doesn't have to take responsibility for the effect that his choices have on others, especially people that he loves. And it makes me cry every time, even though it is definitely a comedy. And it's full of hilarious stuff, full of wonderful performances. Martin Balsam was nominated for an Oscar for it. He plays the guy's brother. And
won.
And won. Thank you, Elliot.
Yeah. One Best Supporting Actor.
And there's a wonderful performance by the teacher from Boy Meets World, who's like
Mr. Feeney.
Mr. Feeney.
William Daniels.
Yeah, he's like 35 years old.
John Adams.
He plays the kind of hard ass or relatively stickler Child Protective Services guy, and it was actually written as the character is actually based on Gene Shepherd, who is the legendary radio host who was also probably...
I really thought you were going to say Gene Shepherd.
Yeah. Who is probably most famous for Christmas Story, right? But the playwright and Gene Shepherd's relationship, they were very close friends, was ended by Gene Shepherd because of this play, because it was essentially a critique of a guy who allowed his brilliance and charm and humor to get in the way of taking responsibility for his own life. Anyway, it's a beautiful movie. For many, many years, it was really hard to watch. It would come on Turner Classic Movies sometimes. There was a VHS that sold for $75 on eBay. But it has just been re-released on Blu-ray, a beautiful new Blu-ray that's $19. And if you are the streaming type, I won't say what tube you can go to watch it on in relatively high quality, because I think everybody involved should get paid. But and in conclusion, the kid, the 13-year-old, he's played by an actor named Barry Gordy, who as a younger child was the voice of the song All I Want for Christmas Is My Two Front Teeth, and as a man was the voice of one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And in between,
Donatello.
Yeah, and in between was the
best
Thank you,
one.
Elliot. And in between was became a lawyer and president of the Screen Actors Guild for quite a long time.
One.
So there you go, 1,000 Clowns. It's called. There are no clowns involved. There are no clowns involved in the film, but there is a part where he leans out the window of his tenement apartment and says, "Rich people, everybody out on the street for volleyball," which is a lot of fun.
And no clowns were hurt during the making of the film because of...
No, that's why they're
that's
why they're not in the movie. They were all hurt.
They didn't want to show it.
They were all injured.
That would have been like that would have basically made it a snuff film.
I mean, they were injured being driven to set. They just put too many clowns in that car.
It was one of those things like that Rip Torn thing where Rip Torn beat the crap out of Norman Mailer or whatever.
Oh, wow.
Oh, have you seen that footage? It is brutal.
It is
terrifying. Because it's in the movie. Oh, man, he hits him in the head with a hammer from behind from his back. There's one that movie, 1,000 Clowns. It's an amazing movie. And as mentioned, there's a performance in it. He's only in one long scene. Gene Saks plays Jason Rivard's boss, who comes to win him back, and it is the most amazing scene of a man who is a person who is a monster, an emotional monster, and just wants people to like him, but is a bully and is It's an amazing. That one scene I always think is amazing.
Yeah, he plays like the children's host that he used to work for, and what's beautiful about it is he is like a monster in that all he lives for is the approval of others, but it also like it's very sympathetic. Like you understand that this is a sad man and that show business is sad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I got a pee, so let's wrap it up. Jesse, thank you for being with us. Is there stuff you would like to plug? I know you yourself have many shows.
Yeah, I own a podcast network called MaximumFun.org with a lot of great shows. The only one I would steer clear of is called The Flophouse.
Oh, what?
Oh, we walked right into that.
The prestige, guys.
I do host and co-host 3 shows. I do an NPR arts and culture interview show called Bullseye, of which I'm very proud. And if you like interviews with figures from arts and culture, including many filmmakers and folks involved in film, recently we've had Steve Buscemi was on the show. That was a wonderful interviewer, a wonderful interview, a great actor, and also a great director. And Kelly Reichardt, who directed First Cow. I mentioned First Cow. First Cow totally rules. What a great movie.
Yeah, I keep putting it off, but I just need to set aside some time.
What's great about it is it's so totally not a homework movie. Like, it's so fun, and it's great.
Yeah.
But anyway,
well, it's about the first cow to be elected president.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, Elliot, our mutual friend Jordan Morris, with whom I've been friends since we were 19 and 18, and I was his RA in college. And I do a show called Jordan Jesse Go that is a silly bullshit comedy show, of which has existed now. It's now going into year 14, I think, something like that.
Trumped us.
And
year ahead.
And it's it's liked by people who like that sort of thing. And then I also do a show with.
And we've all been guests.
Yeah, exactly. You guys have all been guests. You're on the Max Fun Drive episode this year, or at least Dan and Stu are. So you can go listen to an episode with one of the Peaches. And I also do a show called Judge John Hodgman that's a comedy version of The People's Court with the wise and hilarious John Hodgman as the judge. And, in recent years, he's really backed off the key element of his comic character, which was bullying Elliot. So I've sort of had to take it on in his stead.
Yeah.
Doing a bang-up job.
He does occasionally shift to me when he sees me, but he's also gotten a lot nicer over the years.
That's weird. He's nothing but nice to me, guys.
I know, because you're the cool one.
Yeah, he wants you to like him.
I won't like him.
All right. Well, thank you to all of you for listening. Go forth and spread the word however you may like. But for the Flophouse, I've been Dan McCoy.
Hey, thanks, Dirty D McSee. I've been Stuart Wellington.
I'm Elia K. No, I don't know. I want to say thanks also to listeners. Thanks to Jordan Cowling for editing this mess into professional ability. I'm Elliot Kalin. And, Jesse, what's your name?
Jesse Thorn.
See ya. On this episode, we discuss Call of the Wild.
Technically, the Call of the Wild. But why start being pedantic now?
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned, audience supported.